Welcome to the Collective Genius Podcast, the show for real estate investors who are looking to scale.
All right, welcome to the Collective Genius Podcast, CG the podcast. For those that may or may not know, the Collective Genius is the real estate investing community for real estate investors that want to continue to grow and scale their business. Scale means something different for everyone, so our goal for this show is to make sure that we have conversations with geniuses at all levels of real estate investing. And I am excited and honored to have my good friend, Mr. Jimmy Vreeland, join us today for our weekly conversation with the genius. Jimmy, welcome to the show.
What's up, Leon? How you doing?
Well, you know that if I'm having a conversation with you, that I feel like I'm always going to get better, probably get slapped around a little bit. So I'm excited for the people to hear some of the conversations that you and I have on a weekly basis.
Me too. This will be fun.
Yeah. So let's start off with telling a little bit people about where you're from, what you do as a niche, and kind of volume, so we can set the stage so the people that are listening know what you do.
Sure. So Jimmy Vreeland, I operate out of St. Louis, Missouri, Little Rock, and Wichita, Kansas. We have a unique business model in that I used to be a W-2 employee and wanted to get into real estate. And so I have a personally very interested in helping people like I was, say, 10 years ago. So I say that because I own an education company where I show, hey, if you're making a bunch of money as a W-2 and know you need to get into real estate, like keep your eye on the ball, work with a team like mine in a passive manner so you can build your wealth. And so then we have you have people who want real estate. So it's like, okay, what do we have next? We need to find real estate. So we have a wholesaling company. We'll do 200 transactions this year. And then we will sell 40% of those to education students. We'll sell 40% to other wholesale buyers, and we'll sell 20% on the MLS. And then, once you have the house, you need somebody to manage it. So then we also manage 800 properties, and we also own a construction management company, all around finding inventory, helping high income earners build wealth.
There's a lot of moving parts there. Obviously, you didn't start there, so the goal of this show is to show and talk about the journey of the real estate investing entrepreneur, not just, talking about wholesaling or turnkeys or any of those things that you just mentioned, but really, how did you get to that point? Because I think a lot of people that are listening to this are in different phases of their business. And the one reason I feel like this community has continued to grow, the lifeblood of this organization are new members that come in and add value at whatever level they're at that given time. So we're going to speak to the masses here. We're going to speak to the person that is the newer investor. We're going to speak to the person that's a W-2 that's doing it on the side. We're going to speak to the people that are at your level, the CG Premier and the CG CEO level investor. So where I like to start these shows is obviously, we want to know a little bit about what you're doing now, but how all of this got started. So before we get into real estate investing, I don't think I've ever asked you this question. I know a lot of your history, but I don't know, outside of sports, what is it that little Jimmy growing up really wanted to do? Like, truly, I want to do this.
Probably sports, and I had an interest in the Army. So
I knew this. I don't know, outside of sports.
I don't think there was. Well, I'm not.
You didn't have a backup?
No. Like, the Army was the backup, but like, I was blessed very early in that I took a high school, what should you do when you grow up test? And it said priest or soldier. And so
You said, all right, I'll go soldier?
I'll go soldier, yeah. And so, like,
really, like you looked at that and said, "I'm going to choose one of these two options. Out if I don't make it into professional sports, this is what I'm going to do."
do you want to hear a hilarious story about not making it into sports?
Absolutely, I do.
So God blessed me with a lot of ambition, but not necessarily the necessary athletic talent. And so, but like my parents were always, my dad was a genius in that he saw that like drive and ambition was able to steer me places. And like, sure. And then my mom was the best. Like if you put your mind to it, you work hard enough, you can do anything you want in the world. And so my parents combined to do this very masterfully. So the only place I could play D1 football was West Point, and I really wanted to play D1. And I was like, man, the Army stuff looks cool too. And so my first year at West Point was 1999. And at West Point, you could go the first 2 years, and if you don't go to your first class junior year, it's just like, hey, thanks for trying, dude. It's not for you. We get it. But if you go to your first class junior year, you're in. You're in it to win it. You're going to serve 5 years, either enlisted or as an officer. So if you get kicked out, like day 2 of your junior year, you're going in enlisted. And so funny thing about my junior year, first day was, my first day was probably late August 2001. And so it's very clear at this point that I'm never going to see the field on the football team, like going to be a scout team kid the whole way. And so I call home to my dad. I'm like, Dad, I'm coming home. And he's like, what do you mean? He's like, I don't want to do this Army stuff anymore. He's like, what do you mean? He's like, you can't afford college. We can't afford college. Like, what do you mean you're coming home? Like, he was putting him in a position where I knew I had to burn the boats, right?
Right.
And I'm like, I could have gone to Mizzou, but like I said, my dad was pretty good at showing me certain options. And so I'm like, well, Dad, I don't know if I ever want to go to war. And so this is August 2001. He's like, oh, Jimmy, we haven't been to war since Vietnam. You don't have to worry about that.
9 months before. Oh my gosh.
So, but then he was just like, you don't have to worry about that. And he's like, look, I love you, but here's the truth. I allowed you the illusion to believe that you were a football player, so you would go get that top-notch education at West Point.
How old were you when he told you that?
21.
Oh my goodness.
But what a great dad saying, I allowed you the illusion.
Yeah. How'd that land? Like at the time, I mean, obviously it's funny now, but at 21, I'm sure that deflated you a little bit.
I mean, I think he told me what I knew was already happening. I mean, I knew it was a long shot.
Yeah.
It was but I loved the game. And like, even being a scout team guy 4 years, like I still made great friends. And then the real Army was so easy because like a D1 football workout was like for me, the Army workout's pretty easy.
Yeah. So you landed, and thanks to the help of great parents, you landed exactly where you ultimately wanted to be in college, which is Army plus sports, albeit maybe not on the field, but you got to live kind of your childhood dream. You got to do both. And then it's like, I'm 45, and this could either sound like a complete Uncle Rico comment from Napoleon Dynamite about throwing that football 50 yards. But since I didn't achieve what I wanted to achieve, it left a little chip on my shoulder, left me a little pissed off in a good way. Yeah, I think this is why we get along so well, is because I feel like the chip on my shoulder of not playing college basketball, especially at the level that I thought that I was, which was, looking back, was dumb.
Well, no 16 to 25-year-old ever over-evaluates himself.
Yes, of course. And I think that really pushed me, because my backup, I was like, if I can't play sports, I want to be involved in sports. So my backup was being a broadcaster. And I got to live that for, about 6 years out of college. But at least I was like, okay, if I can't play it, at least I can be around it. And to be able to do that, it gave me this chip of going, all right, I didn't make that, but I can make the higher levels of this thing. And that's continued throughout my life and along this journey as an entrepreneur. I guess we'll continue to get to that on your side. So, all right, so you go to West Point. You obviously are deployed. Tell me how that whole process works. I'm fascinated by that. You did you, how does that work to become an Army Ranger? You graduate West Point and you have to, apply for that. How's that work?
Yeah. So then the next step is you got to show success in the regular Army. So, I was a field artillery officer, so I got to go to the most fun place on earth, Fort Sill, Oklahoma, with like all my football buddies, the whole lacrosse team, the whole hockey team. And it was like releasing savages into the wild because we had been bottled up at West Point for 4 years. And so it was like some of the most fun 6 months ever. But there's a pre-ranger program that you couldn't miss any workouts. And then I've always liked challenging myself. And it was like, okay, cool. Ranger school looks like the next hardest thing to do. This looks like fun. And so even though I was having a ton of fun, I was partying a lot. Like the one thing you couldn't do was miss a workout or a smoker. So basically 6 months of going through these, boot camp type smoker exercises. And then you got to go to Ranger school after your officer basic course where I learned to do my regular Army job.
So you ended up with a bunch of athletes in Oklahoma, and a lot of my family's from Oklahoma. Back then, especially, there was a lot of dry counties in Oklahoma. So I'm guessing that was probably a dry county.
Yeah, we would get, you could get liquor on, there was still like the near beer, like the lower alcohol beer at the bars.
3.2.
Yeah.
You call that near beer. You're right. 3.2 alcohol.
But you could get alcohol. You get alcohol on the military post.
I got it. Okay. So it sounds like a fun time. How long were you there?
6 months.
6 months there and then right into Ranger school.
Yeah. So then I went home for Christmas break and then like January 2nd, report to Fort Benning for Ranger school.
Now, I'll fast forward here a little bit. You're deployed and you and I have had this conversation. This is a common theme that we will continue to hear on this podcast, but you happened to pick up a book. Is that where this real estate bug started to bite?
Yeah, my mom saw Kiyosaki on Oprah, and she was like, "You got to look at this. You got to try this out."
That's the first I've ever heard that. I read this Rich Dad Poor Dad book. I've not heard one person say they saw him on Oprah.
Dude, that's what busted him loose. He went on Oprah. And so then, my mom was always sending me books and videos, so she sent me that book. And then I always tell this story for people who complain about interest rates right now. So I go home from mid-tour leave, and my mom missed her calling. Like, she should have been Lori Greiner. Like, she can get so enthusiastic about anything. And so she was very enthusiastic about real estate at the time. And so mid-tour leave, I go looking at houses with me and my brother, and my mom's like, interest rates are at 6%. They're never going to be this low. We got to buy now. And so, because when you were being born, my parents got their first house at 13%.
Yeah, in the 80s, it was 13 to 17%.
Yeah. And so,
in that range.
Yeah. And so then when you're deployed, a lot of things suck, but a couple of things are awesome. Can't spend money, don't pay taxes, get extra pay for hazardous duty. And so I couldn't spend money on anything, so I just sent it back to my mom and brother, and they started buying houses.
Okay, so that's where this journey starts for real estate. Curious, I've never asked you this question. Anyone that was overseas with you take a similar path? Did anyone at that time see you reading that book and go, what are you reading there, Jimmy? I'm interested in that as well.
I had other West Point buddies do it. I got one West Point buddy that bought like 15 houses for me. But nobody in like the units I was deployed with, no.
Interesting. Just you.
Yeah.
No one was interested. What are you reading? No one asked you?
No. I mean, I was reading a lot, though. No one, like all the war movies, I tell this to people all the time, what you can't replicate in a war movie is how boring it is.
Yeah.
And so there was a ton of stuff to read.
All right. So when you got out, how many houses did you have in a rental portfolio that your mom and your brother helped you purchase?
I think 6.
Okay. that's a good starting number. I think in my first 2 years, I bought 6. So that's about right, 4 to 6 in that range.
Yep.
You get back, and the goal is to buy more, to go full time into real estate. What's the next step?
Well, so this is like when I was on Trang's podcast, he helped me see this, but I did everything completely backwards. And so you read Kiyosaki, Kiyosaki's like, hey, and I knew I needed a job. And so Kiyosaki's like, well, you got to go into sales. From his story, he went from the Marines, and then he became a salesman for Xerox. And so I was like, cool, I'll go sell things. And when you get out of the Army, there's headhunter organizations who are like matching you with employers. And so the headhunter was like, tell me about your family. Like, oh, well, my brother's in medical school. And he's like, oh, you like medicine? I was like, sure. But he's like, you want to sell medical equipment? I was like, cool. You got a spot in St. Louis? And then this is like where I just got hooked up. There was an Army football player who ran a branch of Stryker Orthopedics who hired me right away. And the plan was just to make cash and then buy houses.
So the plan was to stay in this corporate type job, continue to buy houses. Did you ever, in that first year of medical sales, did you ever see, I'm going to make this once I get to a certain amount of houses, I'm going to make this transition to full time, or did that come later?
Well, let me time it back a little bit. My last day in the Army was like a week before Bear Stearns went under and the whole market exploded. And I'll never forget the colonel I worked for being like, I think you probably should stay in. But after 3 deployments, I was done. And so, real estate was like a little risky, or everybody was terrified for about 2 or 3 years there.
But this is 2008?
8. Yeah. But the plan and this is where experience has taught me, Kiyosaki was like, as soon as your cash flow equals your expenses, you don't have to work anymore. And so Jordan Peterson says it's better to be walking on the wrong map than not walking at all. And so I would say I was walking with the wrong map, but still a great map. And it's still got things moving.
Right. Just not necessarily the journey that you're taking isn't going to get you to where you want to go ultimately, which we'll get to, because I know a little bit of background on this story. So how long are you doing medical sales?
I did it from 2008 to 2015.
Okay, so 7 years. I didn't realize it was that long.
Yeah.
How were those sales? I'm curious, because I was selling advertising in 2008, and it affected us. In the Midwest, it affected us less than Florida and California and New York and some of these other places, in Phoenix, Arizona, and those places that were hit hard, Vegas, another one. We weren't hit as hard, but obviously the economy across the United States was. How did that affect you for that first 3 years doing that? Because the market wasn't great.
So I sold, like, people are always getting older, and there was always insurance regardless of the economy. And then I also sold a bunch of trauma products. Like if you would break your hip, I sold the nail. So I was working in pretty much an inflexible market. So, and then Stryker had no market share in St. Louis. So it was kind of an entrepreneurial situation. So I didn't know any better to know what was bad. So everything was growth.
This is a question for those people that are considering making that jump in the near future. What was the biggest takeaway that you received from Stryker that you feel like gave you a leg up to start and to get to where you are today? Because I know for me, going door to door, business to business, selling advertising to small business owners really assisted me in acquisitions later, sales training in general. How about for you?
Yeah, their sales training at Stryker was top notch. And then since we were, it was entrepreneurial, there was no market share, I had nothing to lose. I just went for my competition's biggest doctors. And then the a-holes loved me because they could yell at me, they could scream at me, and I would be like, cool, bro, like whatever.
Yeah.
And so I was able to.
You were dealing with surgeons, right?
Yeah.
So of course, they loved yelling at you. Of course,
the biggest I'm trying to keep this a family-friendly podcast.
Yeah.
The biggest a-holes, I love them and they loved me.
Yeah.
So, here's what I teach all our acquisition managers this move. But, I loved question-based selling. And so if I had no chance to close a doctor and I knew they were loyal to the competition, I would still schedule the meeting. I would still go there. I'd ask for all their business after about 30 minutes into the meeting. But I would always, I'd like show up, sit at a doctor's desk, not even build rapport. I just sit there and make them talk. Like, it was so awkward. I was just like, I got to do this because my sales manager says it. And I was just like, this is going to be awkward, but why not put the awkwardness on them and have some fun aggravating them?
Guys, there's the amount of confidence that you have to have, or stupidity, one or the other, to be able to do that and pull it off. How many times did you get kicked out of an office?
Never got kicked out, but I ended up, sales I had a shot with were, probably a 20% close rate. I still got to like a 10 to 12% close rate with the awkward, annoying sale.
There's a lot of takeaways there from a sales perspective.
And it was super fun. It's like you had to show up to work anyway. You might as well amuse yourself.
I can totally see you doing that.
All right. So with our AMs now, I'm like, dude, let them talk. Just sit there and smile and be nice.
Yeah. That's a great takeaway for salespeople that are listening to this. We as salespeople, we love to talk because we feel like it's building trust, and I got to get them to like me. When the reality is, they start to like you when you can relate to what they're saying, not necessarily what you're saying. That's a great takeaway there. I can tell you, I've had some awkward moments. But I never sat in front of a surgeon and just made them talk, especially with that level of confidence that comes from that profession.
It's so much fun. Well, because my brother's a surgeon, I also kind of knew how to push their buttons.
Well, that helps.
I love aggravating my brother, and it was just an extension of messing with him. It was awesome.
Yeah, that's funny. So you're 7 years there. What year did you go, all right, I've got to do my own thing? And what year was that? How many years in?
Yeah, so 2008, get out of the Army. 2009, meet Susie. 2009, marry Susie. 2010, Maria. December 2010, 13 months later, 2012, Bubba comes along. 2014, Tommy comes along. 2015, Johnny comes along.
So this is rapid fire here.
Yeah. And so, Leon's very tight with my wife, but, Susie's very intense. Susie's like, bang, bang, bang. And so you're making good money and your expenses are going up every year because we're, bringing a new kid into the world. And so I was buying about 2 houses a year between 2006, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, about 2 houses a year. So I had got the portfolio up to 14, 15 houses. But I'll never forget. So I had this the day Johnny was born, my best surgeon had cases. So I had to send in a new guy and he messed up. And so I got Johnny in my arms. Johnny came in the morning, but by the afternoon, this surgeon was calling me, blowing me up. And Susie's just like, you know what? You should probably quit. It looks like you should probably make this real estate thing happen. And I love my wife for a lot of reasons, but the guts on that lady after having Maria was still 4 when Johnny came along, but fearless, wasn't worried about money, nothing.
So, I've said this, maybe not on the podcast so far, but I've said this a lot. Partners are important. And when I say that, a lot of people automatically just think business partners, which crucial, obviously, to businesses. But I have never met 2 people more right for each other than you and your wife, because you're both so strong-willed, and neither one of you will take anything off of each other, and you sharpen each other because of your competitiveness, your confidence, how equally aligned you guys are. Like, you're successful because you're a driven human being, but you have the perfect partner to get the best out of you as well. And I can tell you that for those that are listening, obviously we hear a lot about, business breakups because I chose the wrong partner. And I've said this on podcasts in the past that, the number one reason we see that CG members do not continue with this community is usually a partner breakup, both business and personal, that we see. And you, my friend, hit the lottery when you ran into Susie at one of your sales calls, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. So Susie worked for Stryker too. And thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
And this is just occurring to me. So my first Stryker boss, he was a great guy, but he's like, "Oh my God, Jimmy, you're like an unguided missile." Because I would just go like a bull in a china shop, just wrecking shit until I got a sale. And then I'm just kind of having this thought now. I needed my dad guiding that unguided missile. I think Susie and my dad are very tight, but I think she kind of took on the guidance system.
Yeah. Well, so she tells you need to quit when you've got Johnny as a newborn in your arms. And for the record, everybody, all of the kids there, he's got 4 total kids. All of them are competitive athletes, just like their dad. So often people think, oh, in order for me to be, and we'll get deeper into this later, but in order for me to be a great entrepreneur or a great business owner, I can't always have balance. Yeah, and balance doesn't happen out of the gates, but you can achieve it. Jimmy's a living example that balance can be achieved, especially with discipline.
I hate that word, balance.
Okay.
So I think I'm going to go deep real quick.
Okay.
I've had the most fun in life on the edge. Like, so when you're skiing or wakeboarding, like it's most fun when your skis are on an edge, right?
Right. Right before their danger comes.
Yeah. And so when you say work-life balance, I'm like, meh, it's a work-life edge. Like,
I think that's the common word, obviously, is balance. But I look at, and I think that's a great point. I don't think you ever achieve balance when you're a high performing individual. I think it's just like perfection. I never feel like I have reached the top. And I think a lot of high performers, we always feel like we could do better. And I feel the same way towards that word balance. Like, I don't ever feel like I achieve balance in any phase of my life, but I'm always working toward it. So maybe that's what you just mentioned is a clearer, more perfect way of describing it.
Yeah, we in our business, we call it the 5 F's: faith, family, friends, fitness, finances. And so I think you should be developing your God-given gifts and your 5 F's to the utmost of the ability. And the super fun time is when you're able to develop like 2 F's at once. Like Marie, my oldest daughter, like she's definitely going to be doing something for us soon. She's 14, but like she listens to CG calls. Like she's on Zoom calls that I'm on. And it's like, so I'm able to become a better dad, bond with her, and get better. Like the June CG meeting, I'll probably bring her this year. And I can't wait for her to see the keynote.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a game changer. We don't talk about enough, but when we see our members' kids, including my own, my oldest son, has been at a meeting in the past. It is game changing for them to see. I know as a kid, if I would have been able to have access to a room like that, my eyes would have been wide open and I would have just been like Johnny Five back in the movie. I just need input. Keep giving me input. Keep giving me input. The 5 F's, you've presented on that. And I will get to your journey into full-time real estate investment. But if I could speak to this real quick, I have seen you and other members over the last really 3-4 years really get dive in deeper on making sure that your culture is what you want it and that your employees are also achieving their goals, not just your goals as a company. I want to work backwards here a little bit because I don't want to gloss over that. And I don't want to gloss over, by the way, you got an opportunity there. Give 2 Fs. That might be a little slogan you can use if you're working towards 2 of those or trying to maximizing. Give 2 Fs. I like that. Tell me real quick, just give me a Cliff Notes version of, how you guys are developing and leaders within your organization to make sure that they're happy in their work life close as possible to balance.
So the work life edge, you mean?
Yeah.
So the greatest book ever, like if you're listening to this podcast, go to Audible right now and get The Dream Manager. And so
I don't have to ask you what your book recommendation is later. It's The Dream Manager.
The Dream Manager, because it just has this simple concept is what's the purpose of a business, Leon?
To make money.
How do you make money?
Well, I mean, I know the answer, but I say that quickly because you don't have a business if you don't turn a profit.
Right. Like, it's not, profit is a means to an end, but and it's important. I'm not saying we're some hippie business where we're like, oh yeah, express your feelings to me and let's make sure we hit a target once in a while.
But nobody can reach any of their goals if we're not making money. And that's why it's my quick answer, because that's the answer that most people are going to give you.
I got to give credit to you and Jason. When I first walked into CG, like Jason would want to talk, or you would want to talk, or there'd be a keynote talking about the softer side of life. And I'd be like, oh, come on, dude, just show me how to make the money. Right. And I didn't make as many friends at CG when I had that attitude. I didn't grow as fast, and it wasn't as much fun. And so, I think
how'd you make that switch? How'd you make the switch where a business's purpose is beyond money? That's a great segue to what you were setting up.
I started to listen to a ton of Jordan Peterson, and I started really thinking about purpose and meaning. And it was just like, no, I'm here for purpose and meaning. And then I kind of walked away from religion in the church because I thought there was like a conflict between hitting big, audacious targets and being a nice person. And so then I heard a podcast with Jordan Peterson and a man named Bishop Barron, where they're like, no, purpose and meaning and religion is the hero's journey. It's like you're called on earth to go on your own hero's journey. And so, but basically the hero's journey is you hear a call to adventure. Generally, that's your purpose or meaning calling you. You cross the threshold, then it's just road of trials. And eventually you'll hit an abyss where you either turn around and quit. And I've hit in business, you're going to hit an abyss. Or you metamorphosize and learn and go through it. And then after enough abysses, I started having so much fun doing it. And then chasing purpose and meaning that like net profit is important. It's just not enough. So that was a long answer to like 4 years of studying and podcasting and meditating and praying.
Well, I hope what gets across on these weekly episodes, especially as we're talking to members like yourself that are longtime CG members, premier level and up, soon to be CEO level. When I'm talking to members every week, I want it to get across that, there's no secret sauce that, you may gain some knowledge here that you can take and put in your business tomorrow that may make a difference. But the biggest message I want to get across, and I hope that comes across, is every single member that I've talked to on this weekly podcast, you just hear continuous learning. No one that gets on here goes, I've got it all figured out. I've got the biggest business in my city. I'm good. I don't read anything. I don't listen to any podcasts. I don't go to any communities to learn from others. I've got this all figured out. And that's an extreme example. But the biggest message I want to get across is, I read a long time ago that Teddy Roosevelt, well-known president, obviously, on his deathbed, he underneath his pillow was a book. I mean, the day the guy died, he was still learning. And I think that's the biggest separator of those that are in a community like ours that are wanting to grow and scale. They're growing personally as well as professionally on a daily basis. And they take that time to make sure that they're reading and learning from others. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And then I think I got to a point too, where I was starting to like really study this hero's journey thing. And then like I see you with your boys, and I ask myself this all the time. It's like, when you're on your deathbed, does anybody want them to be like, man, their kid to be like, my dad, that guy, he was just a wonderful example of mediocrity. Like, always took care of himself, never really challenged himself. Like, nobody wants that. And so then I was like, look, it's kind of, and then for the military, it was kind of corny saying, hey, I want to be a hero. But I kind of had to be like, no, at the end of the day, with my kids, with my wife, like, I want to be viewed as a hero in their eyes. So, what do I have to do that? Well, I probably have to do somewhat heroic things. I'm not talking about re-enlisting, but there's little heroic moments in anybody's daily activity.
There are. It's just, I think this comes back to being involved in youth sports for 15 years. You and I have had this conversation. My coaches, one in particular, is the reason that I coach, poured so much into me. A lot of the listeners know my story. I didn't grow up with a father. And so my father figures were like my grandfather and coaches. And, they would push the mess out of me because they knew that I didn't really have anybody pushing. My mom worked so much. And I just remember that every time I think about what you were just mentioning in front of my children, especially, I always think that as a coach, their job, they always told me, was my job is I'm going to be hard on you because my job is to maximize your potential. And I think the same way towards, my business. I think the same way towards my relationship. I think the same way with my kids. I am doing them a disservice if I don't lead by example, but also push them to a point to make sure that they're maximizing every single minute of their lives. Because as we know, this life is short and none of this matters. If all you do is work and have a big business, but your kids never see you and don't know how great of a leader you really are because you're not a leader, able to be a leader with them. I don't know why I went down that path, but
then
something
also the people they work with think you're just using them to get a paycheck, and then I don't want to be viewed as just a paycheck to my team members.
Yeah,
and like going back to sports, like I love playing a game. Like I thought I loved basketball. I thought I loved football. I just love playing games.
Yes,
and there's no better game than business. Now, I'm very biased, but I think the most fun game is the real estate game. But
okay, so now we got to get back into the story of how you said I'm going to jump full time into this because you saw business, specifically real estate, as the opportunity for you to play that game that you wanted to play as a kid, be a professional business person.
Maximize potential, because I was getting bored with selling. It was the same.
Okay.
It was getting monotonous. There was no personal growth happening.
Especially after 7 years. And were you in the same role? You probably got some promotions, but you were in a similar role.
It was this weird corporate thing where if I went to a management job, one, I'd have to be have less fun, watch my mouth more, and make less money. Yeah. And so it was like this. I felt very stuck and very frustrated.
I've been there. I understand that completely. I took the management role, making less, but actually allowing myself to pour into others. And I'm glad I chose that path. But after 11 years, I too had to have a change. So when you made this decision, you got little Johnny in your arms, and your wife says that to you. Are we talking a year later? When did you take this jump?
So all the sales training from Stryker, I figured out how to raise private money really, really fast. And so I was, and then speaking of business support, so I had a partner at the time who was a wholesaler. And so I was the money guy bringing in cash. And so we bought 60 houses in 2000. Johnny was 15. 2016, we bought 60 houses. And so Susie was just genius. She's like, look, emotionally, I get it. You've quit. And that's awesome. And she's just like, ride this gravy train as long as you can. And then the next year, 17, we bought another 60. And then she was
what
like,
are you doing with these 60? Are you flipping them? Or are you wholesaling them? What are you doing?
Poorly managed lease option burrs.
Okay.
So like straight up side hustle, because it was sales, so I didn't have to be in an office. So then I would just go to the real estate office every day and show up for the surgeries that I needed to.
Right.
Because like all
for as long as you could.
Yeah. And then once we got to like 120 houses and we had to start hiring people, and I probably should have waited a little bit longer, but Susie was just tired of me bitching and was just like, I don't want to hear it anymore. Just quit and like do what you've always wanted to do.
Supportive. Love it.
Can I tell one quick Susie story?
Sure.
The girl I was dating when I left the Army, she's like, well, what are you going to do now you're out of the Army? And I had her listen to Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And she's like, you can't do that. Ooh. And I was just like, maybe you're right. But I think this relationship has run its course. But now.
Can't continue.
Yeah. Susie, on the other hand, first time we went on a road trip, like I had her, it's a 4-hour book, 4 hours between St. Louis and Kansas City. Listened to it, and she was like, cool, sounds fun. Like, you should definitely give that a shot.
This is another example of how perfect the two of you are for each other.
So yeah, she got tired of hearing me complain, and she's like, look, you've done the gravy train as long as you can. Like, now there's probably an opportunity cost for you not jumping. I think, in hindsight, I think I should have stayed another 18 months.
So pause there, because I often talk to people that are right on that edge that are just about to join our Elevate level group. So they're currently doing, 14 to 24 deals a year, wholesaling, hoteling, fix and flip, just a combination of all things while working at W-2. And the common, and that, our Elevate level, all of our levels are full-time real estate investors, unless they have already made a date and they're in the next month or so making that commitment to jump. And I get quite often, should I jump now? And I've talked people off of that ledge many a time because they were premature in what they were trying to accomplish. Once talking to them, I realized that you need to stay where you're at because you don't have enough foundation built to make that jump. It's possible, but it's not ideal. I think that's a super important, piece of this. Like, you probably should have stayed a little bit longer. And there's never going to be, it's like having kids. It's never a perfect time. But that from our experience, the longer you can milk that, the better in most cases.
Yeah. And I think there's the misconception I was under was like, it was a victory to like tell your boss to take this job and shove it. Like, now I'm a business owner. Right. And it's like, dude, being a business owner sucks.
It does.
It's very rewarding, but it sucks.
That is a consistent you will hear on this show almost every episode, is that it's rewarding. And the best ones are super boring and it sucks on a daily basis. But it's the reward far outweighs the suck. I personally would say, based upon my own experiences, but also all the members that I have relationships with. So, all right, we still haven't gotten to the point where you're now full-time. Here's a good segue to that. What did you know about mastermind communities when you are now into your job full-time? Did you know they existed, and when and how did you find out about them?
So I didn't know wholesaling existed. I didn't know any masterminding. If you would have, as a W-2 employee, if you would have told me to pay for a community, I'd been like, huh? What are you talking about? What? Right. You kidding me? So we're plugging away in 2017, got some poorly managed, and I've listened to a lot of Dan Sullivan, and he has a buddy named Joe Polish. And so I start getting open to the idea of masterminding and like networking and meeting with different people. And so this is how I like start taking that leap. I go onto Joe Polish's website because he has the Genius Network event. Genius. And Joe Polish is a genius internet marketer. I click on the page, like, come to Genius Network. And click here. I was like, click. And it was like, are you good enough to be a Genius Network?
Oh, my goodness. Well, that totally spoke to you.
Yeah, like, what? You're saying I can't do this? And then they're like, prove it by clicking this button. I hit click. And then it's like, prove it. Get out your credit card and pay 10 grand right now. And so it was a mastermind of marketers. Didn't belong there. I wasn't a marketer. Didn't have 10 grand, put it on a credit card. And so fly out to Phoenix for this mastermind. And just I'm a fish out of water. But they had you do this exercise where you stand up, turn around to the first person you see and shake their hand. And that person was Jason Medley.
The chances of that happening, like, this was meant to be. Like, there's no one else in CG that I'm aware of that has that story right there. There's been some people that have met Jason at other events, but never where it was turn around, shake of the hand, hey, this is Jason Medley.
So I spend that Genius Network thing being pretty depressed because I feel completely out of my league. Like, no, I'm truly not good enough to be here. But Jason, I think, saw that, kind of took me under his wing. And then he said real estate, but then it was like this weird, awkward thing. Like, he felt like he was poaching clients from Joe Polish and didn't want to do that. But then when he said real estate mastermind, and I realized I was a fish out of water and belonged in CG, like, I just went back to the doctor selling. I just sit down next to him at the bar, not say anything.
Awkward.
Make him initiate conversation, and eventually got the invite to CG.
If anyone knows Jason, and if you don't, he is a stickler for that, is not going to other people's events and poaching. It's just something that, he's never done before. But obviously, if somebody engages the conversation and they're a better fit, especially in your particular case, you had no business being the Polish event. You really needed to be, honestly.
I needed to be a CG.
You needed to be in CG, but at the time, and I remember this, you had a bunch of doors, but you really didn't have a business. And so really you would have been like an Elevate or a Select person because you had a bunch of doors, but you really didn't have a business to speak of at the time, right?
Yeah. And so if there's some Elevate and some Select members, I've had this conversation a few times with people, but this is where I realized I was walking on the wrong map. And this is where the Kiyosaki, once your cash flow equals your expenses and you're rich, it sets people up for failure. So I had 120 rentals, like, on paper, without maintenance, without management. I had enough cash flow to and I called it my strike number. I needed $7 grand a month so I didn't have to work. And we're talking about a 37-year-old male at the prime of his life saying, I don't want to work anymore. Like, it's stupid. Right. And so I show up to CG with 120 poorly managed lease option rentals with $5 million of private debt on it. Because I could outsell my punt coverage, if that makes sense, right?
It does.
And so my sales ability was better than my operational ability. So I show up to CG 2017 I called it the CG slap. It was a wake-up call where, Scott Myers, Joe Taylor. I remember, by day 2, I was legitimately scared. And then Jason kind of took me under his wing. He's like, hey, bro, how you making money? I'm like, what are you talking about? It's like, Kiyosaki, I got cash flow. And he's like, no, how do you make active money? Because just sitting and buying rentals, like, you're in too much debt. Your family's at too much risk. He's like, you need to find a way to get active cash in your business. And so I remember Joe Taylor spent 2 days with me explaining EOS, explaining rocks, explaining operations. Scott Myers is just like, hey, Jimmy, I was in the same position you were. Like, started with lease options, and it's just like, dude, it's not going to work. It's not good enough for you or your family. And so I left First CG terrified, but kind of taken care of, if that makes sense.
It does.
Like,
I mean,
it wasn't like you're screwed, get out of here. It was you're screwed, but here's what you need to do in the next 90 days.
So that's a perfect example. Of when I joined this organization, I didn't know anyone in the room the first time. And the people that saw what we were doing wrong or my challenges during my hot seat presentation would come up to me and say, I can help you with that. I was blown away. I didn't think rooms like that existed, especially for me in 2015. I felt like everyone in real estate, especially in my home market, was just, this is all mine. You can't have my secrets of sending the same direct mail piece over and over and over again. My secret, right? My strategy. CG wasn't like that at all. And quite frankly, I remember being nervous when presenting because people would call you out on dumb ideas. Because we all had these great ideas of how we're going to go into multifamily or we're going to go into these other things. And they were like, what are you doing? The big one back then was, I'm going to become a coach. I'm going to be an educator. Like, what are you doing? You haven't gone deep enough in your current business. Why would you now add another headache to your operations? That CG slap was, maybe we need to bring that back a little bit, or not a little bit, a lot of it. Because that I missed that, where you were nervous to present something new, but you knew that you would get honest feedback on that new idea. So I don't have to ask you what you received, because your first meeting, you immediately received this eye-opening experience from others to say, this is what you need to do in the next 90 days.
Yeah, I mean, I was coming in with 120 rentals. I thought I was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And just being humbled that, hey, one, what you're doing won't work long-term, and two, it's not that big a deal. We got people in this room doing 300 and 400 deals. Like, the humbling was awesome. Yeah.
You talked about it earlier. I think this is the important piece and takeaway from Rich Dad Poor Dad is it has gotten a lot of people started, which is awesome. I mean, it's really cool to see this book that was written many, many years ago, how many investors speak to they've been able to buy real estate and hold real estate because of this book motivated them. But to start to run a successful business, the formula doesn't continue, right? That's what you didn't realize. Even though you had 100+ doors, what you didn't realize is that wasn't a repeatable process for business long term.
Well, and what Jason helped me understand was there's active income and there's passive income. And like his wisest line, if you ever wrote a book, it needs to be passive income comes after hyperactive active income. And that's what I didn't understand. I tried to short circuit it, and that's kind of why I did everything backwards. And so
how long did it take you to implement all of the things that you knew? Because you are, I say this quite often, there's not many people that take an idea and implement it faster or want to get after it from quarter to quarter than you. You're the best implementer, or one of the best implementers in this group. How long did it take you to get up to speed to say, all right, now I know what I need to do. I need to create active income with an operational system. What was that turnaround like from your first CG?
I'm really good at implementing when I'm scared too. And I was terrified. So about 90 days. And then this is where like CG was awesome. So I got the business stabilized with some EOS, some targets, some rocks, some operations. So it was least not it was still chaotic, but not massive chaos. And then it was like, hey, dude, you have 120 rentals. There's a bunch of buyers out in the market that want already occupied houses. So I would say the back 6 weeks of that first quarter, I started figuring out how I could turnkey properties. And then I became super besties with Mark Delatorre, who was already doing turnkey. And he could have, I'm 4 hours away from him. He could have looked at me as competition, being like, no, one day I want to take over St. Louis. but instead he took me under his wing and like taught me how to start doing property management, taught me what a turnkey buyer wants. And then there were other people in the groups, Mercedes Torres, who actually sold my first 2 turnkeys.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
She sold through their group. She sold your first 2.
Yeah. So she gave me the business that there was possibility. And so then I just went to all my private lenders and was just like, hey, instead of lending, why don't you own some of these? And so that, then back to the Stryker sales training, that helped build the market of who I was selling to.
Did you know what turnkey?
Dude, I know what wholesaling was. I didn't know what turnkey was until I went to CG. I did everything backwards. By the way, you should wholesale first, then flip.
Yeah.
Then, if you choose to manage property after a long, long time. But that's
I was going to ask you what the advice would be, and there it is. There it is. Wholesale first.
Well, Jerry Norton helped me understand this one. It comes down to your age a little bit, but more importantly, it comes down to, do you have a cash machine or you don't have a cash machine? And so I would qualify a cash machine as active income over $200,000 a year. If you're making active income over $200K a year, you should probably keep trying. That'll be your fastest way to keep growing your active income. That as a W-2, as a business owner, because here's the dirty secret you don't see on Instagram. For you to get over $200K of free cash, after-tax cash from your own business, it is hard. And no one will ever admit that on Instagram. But you agree or disagree with that, Leon?
I agree. Absolutely. Yeah. I was going to ask you as a follow-up, I'm trying to get as much of the negative, the failures as possible from these. We've talked about a lot of the good that you've been able to accomplish in this journey. And we don't hear a lot of the losses. Like, give me something that
every business I've ever started, I lost $150K the first year I did it.
And how many businesses is that?
Property management. First time we did that, we lost 150. I was doing the distributions, and I was paying the owner whether the tenant paid or not, just because I didn't want anyone to bother me. And so, 150 on that.
You funded that through your active income, that loss?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wholesaling, lost 150K the first year we did it. Construction management, lost 150K first year we did it. Like, we're not having a great year personally flipping this year. Like, that's going to be a break even. Like, and so that's what the other thing CG helped me. All the failures, don't be ashamed of it. Just learn from it. And there's somebody in the room to help you. And then now all the failures are funny stories that I get to go on podcasts and talk about.
But because you can look at failures as, I'm done with this. Why don't have you ever had that where you're going, oh man, I'm done. I just lost another $150,000. Have you ever had that thought?
I don't think, I could not quit the Army because I couldn't go to my dad and say these 2 words, I quit.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of that in business, and business is a little different. Like, you need to say, hey, as long as there was still an opportunity and I just needed to learn, I wasn't going to quit. But then certain things aren't efficient and doesn't make sense to be doing. That's not quitting. That's redirecting energy.
I think that the lesson here, advice for investors at any level, if you're not keeping reserves, like, you're going to, as you grow, you're going to have, real estate is a great asset class. We think it's obviously at the Collective Genius, and everybody that we'll talk to, we're all in real estate because we feel like it's the best. But there are years, I can tell you, from 2019 to March of 2022, it was the land of milk and honey. Low interest rates, people buying assets without you doing anything to them for $20,000, $30,000 more than usual. But the music stopped playing roughly March of 22 when interest rates changed and institutions stopped buying. And all of a sudden, everyone that was, pocketing millions, and if they didn't keep those reserves, we saw a lot of people fall by the waysides, just because they didn't have that rainy day fund to offset those losses that come with change.
And that we were talking earlier in the podcast about the team and what's important and whatnot. Marcus, so I'm sure you have Marcus on the podcast. He's the accountant for a lot of people at CG. But Marcus sat me down. He's like, because I was like, dude, maybe I should just all shut it down and just manage houses. And he's just like, well, dude, you've built a really good team. Are you willing to disintegrate that team because you're having 1 or 2 or 3 bad quarters? And the answer was clearly no. And he's like, because I'm your accountant, and I know you're a dumbass. I made sure that you saved a liquid reserve. And so that to me is fun's not the right word, but at a certain point in business, you start reserving cash to protect the team. And so that team never goes away. Like, that's the fun part. And
especially when you've built the business to the level that you've built it, you've hired some great people. I know a lot of them. And you do not want to lose talent. When you have talent that you talked about the dream manager earlier, they've got great goals. They're committed to the team, and it takes one bad swoop that comes through that all of a sudden you've got to lay off people that you never wanted to lay off because of their talent and how they're bought in. Let's end with this in regards to the business. There's a lot that we miss, and we'll obviously have some follow-ups in the future. But I would like to know what you're most excited about right now in your business. Something I don't think I've asked anyone to date. But I know you're always looking at what's next and are excited for something. And I know we can get bored in business, but when you have things that you're trying or doing new, to be excited about something is motivating. So what is it for you?
So I had this conversation with Bobby this week. So we're doing annual planning, and we had
tell everybody who Bobby is, by the way.
So Bobby is my partner in the wholesaling business. And so, Bobby was another Army football guy, started as acquisition manager with us, is a entrepreneurial spirit, so was able to grow. And then I was happy to give up equity on what we're growing. And so Bobby was like,
Stop right there. I don't want you to lose the rest of that. But you just said that you brought someone on that was very like-minded as you, that you were not afraid to hire because if I train them up, they'll go and work for somebody else or start their own thing in the future. That wasn't a concern for you.
I was a concern. It wasn't something I was going to
stop you.
Yeah.
So my point in saying that in previous podcasts, we've had this conversation where someone will say, I've got this perfect person, but I'm so worried if I hire them and train them up that they're going to go do this on their own. The likelihood of that happening is a small percentage. Most people are okay especially if you implement the dream manager and all the things that Jimmy talked about earlier. Most great employees like that, you're not going to want to lose them. So at some point, more than likely, you're going to have a new venture that you want them to be a part of because you want to invest in that individual and you know they have an entrepreneurial spirit and they've proven themselves. So you go, here you go. I want you to be my partner in this particular piece of business.
Yeah. And so, would you rather have 100% of a small pie or would you rather have a certain percentage of a really big pie? And let me finish what I'm most excited about. I think that will help answer that question. So Bobby's like, look, here's our stretch targets, right? And it was something like, it was it was us be doubling the current business. And it was like, okay, is that really our target? Is it realistic? Essentially, we would have to spend 2015 having our best month ever for 12 consecutive months. And
2025.
Yes.
You said 2015. So
I'm sorry.
2025. Yeah.
2025. And so, I'm an American. I believe you can do anything if you put enough time in and work hard enough. But I also have enough experience to know a stretch goal where you have to have your best month ever for 12 consecutive months is a recipe for team dysfunction. And so I just asked him a simple question. I was like, well, dude, what's our desired end state? What are we trying to do here? And we have this articulated and written out, and we spend a lot of time and money articulating this, but we want to build highly functioning teams that give discretionary effort. It's very simple. Like, the fun for me is playing this game with more and more people, probably in more and more markets. But at the end of the day, I just want to build high functioning teams. Will high functioning teams lead in net profit? Absolutely. But the fun for me, the game is, because I still got that chip on my shoulder that I've never got out on the field, is that I want to play the game with higher and higher functioning team. Definition of a high functioning team is a team that can take on bigger and bigger commitments and fulfill. And so I was like, dude, if we throw that number at the team, is that going to help us get a higher functioning team or not? And he was like, no. And I was like, okay, cool. What number will? And so then we readjusted numbers with the team's input. Like, hey, do you guys hit your targets if we hit this number? And so what I'm most excited in the business is playing on and growing more high functioning teams.
Yeah. You led with high functioning teams, and profit is a byproduct of it. I think that's a great lesson. Obviously, we talked about earlier, profit, you don't have a business unless you're profitable. But once you get to that point, helping others succeed to get to their goals, ultimately everyone will win.
And being on a low functioning team, it's just hell on earth.
It stinks for everybody, man. Like, no one wants to be around a bunch of negative Nancys and people that are losing. I had this argument all the time in corporate. I'm like, guys, yes, we need to set high goals, but we also need to set high goals that are achievable based upon trends, not based upon some arbitrary number that you just throw out to us every year. We want $1 million worth of growth. Well, I want a lot of things, but that's not going to happen. So let's make sure that we put goals that stretch people, but at the same time, everybody can win, so we can celebrate around here instead of us just really, busting everybody up every single week because their efforts is kind of like what you said to me one time is like, Leon, the only two people in this world that make me feel bad about my current net profit on an annual basis is you and Jason, because it's not enough for me to continue to grow within the community. I want people to have these achievable goals and push them at the same time. It's important, but man, when you just throw out arbitrary numbers, it can really be deflating to a team.
And then it's just, because that's how I used to run the business. It was like, and I told this story to the team yesterday. It was like, so I had this business because I wanted a boat. And so whatever number I had to get that boat, I just drove the team, drove myself, drove the team. Yeah, and it sucked.
Yeah.
And then really high functioning people
You did get the boat. I've been on it.
Yeah, the boat's awesome. But it was like, okay, cool. Like, the second I signed the check for the boat, I was just like, what's next? And every human being's like that. So it's like,
yeah,
I'm not going to sacrifice my team for my own material, like, ambitions. Like, we're going to have ambitions. We're going to get after it and have some fun. But it's not as much fun if it's just about me. It's boring.
Yeah. So there's a lot of nuggets in there. Let's go to some rapid fire here to end. I think if I asked you this first question a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, it may have been different. But tell me what your superpower is today. What do you feel like it is?
Ooh. I think probably galvanizing teams.
What would it have been 5 years ago?
Selling.
Yeah. What about 3 years ago?
A mix between that. Probably wouldn't have been comfortable enough to say it. I would probably say being a visionary, something like that.
I think you're the other piece that, if Superman has, like the laser eyes and the ability to fly, I think we all have multiple superpowers. I would say the other one is that chip you talked about earlier. And I'm telling you, man, this is the only reason that I've had somewhat success from where I came from. It has everything to do with how I grew up and the things that everybody else had. The material things are first what motivated me. Obviously, it's bigger, much, much bigger than that as I grew up. But man, that chip, I mean, I used to, when I would be in interviews for corporate jobs back in the day, people would say, why are you so driven? And I couldn't articulate it back then, but I would say it's that chip of not hitting my early goals in sports and not accomplishing all the things that I wanted to accomplish early on in life.
All I'll say about that is the chip can be used for good or evil. So it's such a 50-50 that's why I don't know if I'd lead, but that's a superpower.
Right. It is a superpower, but it's like social media. It can be great and it can be horrible. Right?
It can build things or it can burn things fast.
Exactly right. Give me something that no one knows about you.
I love sitting and reading Catholic theology books.
I didn't know that. I knew that you love history. You are well read on history because you will quote something from the 1600s to me, and I'm like, hold on, I love history, but I'm not going back that far. Why? Where'd that come from?
Purpose and meaning. Like it's 2,000 years of people trying to figure it out, and I'm like,
yeah,
I'm going to give maybe a shot at 100 years of trying to figure it out. Like there's probably some wisdom that I could benefit from. And then I love paradoxes. Like you have to give everything away to get things. And so those theology books are all wrapped in those paradoxes.
Love that. You mentioned Dream Manager as the book that you would suggest. Any others that have really helped you along the way here in the last few years?
If you're getting started and you're scared, chase the lion. Once you've crossed the threshold and you're in the road of trials, read The Road Less Stupid. Trying to think of a great, Man's Search for Meaning, when you're in the abyss.
Mm-hmm.
And then, what else is really good? 10X. Once you got the boon, 10X is better, easier than 2X.
2X. Those are all great suggestions. I've said this before on podcasts that, I have so many people writing down books during presentations that I want to give a ton of those, and we'll put those in the show notes. What about, I know this is your new favorite podcast, but is there any particular podcast that you don't miss an episode of?
Jordan Peterson.
Wait, how long ago did you find that one?
My mother-in-law introduced me to him probably like 2017, right when he was getting famous.
You've got some great in-laws and parents, man. They've helped you along the way a lot on knowledge and obviously steering you in the right direction.
Absolutely, yeah. When you're an unguided missile, you need that.
That you are the ready, fire, aim guy is funny coming from a Ranger. That said, as I said earlier, you are the best implementer in this group of taking a concept and really, I think that's also another superpower of yours. Like you hear something that you love, and generally in the collective genius, when there's ideas that are shared, we typically do the math on this. It's an extra $1 million of revenue. Like anything that we put pencil to paper, when someone comes up with a new idea that they're going to implement, generally, if done right in a certain amount of time, usually a 1 to 3 year period, someone can turn that idea into another $1 million of revenue to their business. So I think that's another superpower to add. That's hard to do, is take, from a visionary standpoint, take an idea and implement it within a 90 to 120 day time frame to actually turn it into a business, something to grow your business.
But like in the beginning, dude, like it was like, I can't go back to CG, like not showing Leon and Jason that like I took something from it. Like it was like, or Mark, like, look, I felt like I'd be out of integrity, but it was like, I can't go back there. If I said I did it, I'm going to do it. Like I can't go back there not saying I did it.
We need more like that. I think we do a lot of great things in the community, and we have a lot of members that implement ideas, but I want to figure out a way to drive more competition to best. But it was like ideas implemented.
You and Mark and Jason spent a lot of time with me. And if I were to just like not act on it, it'd be a waste of your time. And there was also that kind of component as well.
that guilt
Like-
that you would have.
If you're going to do a synergy meeting with somebody and take their time and they're going to take the time to help you and then you just don't do anything with it, like that's a little disrespectful.
I appreciate you saying that. I will say this, that again, you're the best implementer, but you're also, especially early on when I came on this side 6.5 years ago, I remember you just always, whenever you needed something, you asked for it. I knew that if you asked for it, you weren't going to waste anybody's time, that you were stuck and you needed to talk to someone that already had implemented something that you were trying to do. And to me, that's when you're truly maximizing this community, it's doing what you did and continue to do within this community. So there's a lot of people listening to this, Jimmy, that would love to probably talk to you about turnkeys and all the things that you're doing, and maybe they don't want to do it on their own. They want to buy properties from you, what have you. So how do those people find you?
Instagram, Jimmy Vreeland, V as in Victor, REELAND, or just tag me in the Facebook group.
Anything that you've got going on here in the near future, that event-wise, or anything that you want to share here?
No, just thanks to you, thanks to Jason, thanks to CG. Like I tell everybody, I'd be completely broke. So you could be an unguided missile and you can make really big mistakes and really be a dumbass if you got a great community around you. But like you guys are the greatest insurance policy ever sold. Because I think it's easy for you guys to sell what you do when things are hot, and like in 2020 when we would like breathe and then make money. But like the true value in my experience in CG is when you're in the abyss, when things are hard. Like you guys coached us to set your budget, your catastrophic budget and all that stuff. And it was like the one thing I would not cut are the certain team members and then you guys. Because the greatest insurance policy ever. I could sleep at night because of you guys in 2022.
Well, in times where, during 2020 and anytime we've had these big events, the interest rate changes in 22, immediately we go all hands on deck. And so we're supporting in between, but us also these calls. I remember COVID.
Remember COVID? Like it was all hands on deck every day.
We had 100, we broke Zoom. We had 60 people the week after COVID. That's with intentionality. We make this community. So, when people are lost, not sure what to do, you're right. That's something that we take, very seriously and want to make sure that we support, because we can't predict the future, but man, we can darn sure prepare you for it, and something that we take very seriously. So I appreciate it. Jimmy, this is always great. I enjoy, as I said to you in pregame, the fact that I get to talk to my fellow members and friends. These relationships, the fact I get to do this on a weekly basis now is it's fun for me. It's the new thing that I was looking forward to. These conversations, I learned a lot new today, and I'm sure the people did as well. So. This is the relationships. I didn't know Jimmy Vreeland until I was on this side of CG. Like as a member, I did not know Jimmy, and I consider him a brother. His kids are like my kids, and vice versa. When I need something, he's one of the first people that I call. And there are a ton of people in this group that are like that. So if you want to learn more about how you get in the room with guys like Jimmy Vreeland, you can find us at thecollectivegenius.com and all the socials. We're obviously there as well. And this has been, this is a labor of love on a weekly basis now. So we look forward to seeing you next week on the next CG podcast. For now, we'll talk to you next week.
Are you ready to scale your real estate business? Visit thecollectivegenius.com, where real estate investors come to scale. Subscribe to the Collective Genius podcast and hit the bell icon to be notified when our next episode releases. And thanks for listening.